Hi there, Jay. How are you doing this?
I'm doing well.
Is it
I'm doing
is
well.
it morning? It's morning to you,
It
isn't
is.
it?
That's
Yes.
morning on. It's actually a holiday here today. It's
Oh,
Family Day in Ontario,
good.
Canada. Yep.
Okay. All right. I didn't know that. So, Jay, Building a Modern Employer Brand podcast wants to welcome you as our guest today. Can you introduce yourself the ever way you wanted to our lovely
Sure.
audience?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. Great to be here, talking about my favorite subject. So yeah, pleased to be here. I've been in the employer branding space for longer than it's been called employer branding. I actually got my start. I was a expedition guide, leading expeditions in remote parts of the world. Everything from sea kayaking expeditions to mountain dog sledding to sea
Wow.
kayaking, and started working more and more with adult groups, started doing more team building with adult groups and facilitating team building, and then using psychometrics as part of that process to help people work together. And then started getting involved in the psychometric side more and more, and ended up working for the team psychologist for the Quebec Nordiques and the NHL. And then we started serving all of the NHL, looking at athletes and predicting performance of athletes and working on that side of recruiting in professional sports. And then started doing that work with life banks and financial pharma all around the world. So we were processing about 10,000 assessments of candidates every week in 42
Wow.
languages. Took over the marketing role of that company, became marketing director for that company. We had two parts of the business: a training side of the business, helping to develop self-managed high-performance cultures, and then the assessment side, predicting performance of candidates in the pre-selection process. Did that for 5 years, and after that ended up at another assessment tool company called Caliper. Then ended up at Manpower in Right Management, the consulting arm of Manpower. And then I spent the last 10 years as a managing director at Universum, building employer brands for companies. But when I was doing the assessment work, we were predicting performance and working with companies to develop what we called at that time vanity sites. And that was kind of employer branding before anybody called it that, but helping companies to offer virtual interviews so that a candidate that was interested in a position who was looking on a Sunday night and didn't want to go back to work on a Monday morning could click a button that said begin interview now. And we started to put them in our process. But all of that was through the skin of the employer. So
Wow.
that early employer branding space. Now, this would have been 17 years ago now.
Yeah.
So long before it was called employer branding, but I've seen a lot of changes in the field. So that's kind of now I'm director at the Martech, which uses AI in the employer branding process. But that's where I am. That's how I got here. Kind of
Yeah.
a unique journey.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there are quite a few of sort of touching points. If I look back to my career in HR, talent acquisition, employer branding, working also with company cultures over the course of past 22 years shortly. I started my first HR job in 1st of April in 2002, many moons ago. Definitely the psychometric area has always been something really captivating for me as well through talent acquisition and understanding really more about the work personalities of people and how important for you it is to literally work in an environment where your preferred way of work that matches your work personality is supported and is accepted, and it feels comfortable for you to do your thing, use your skills and your experiences and your potential for that organization so that it always feels like you're not really fitting in because
Mm-hmm.
you like to do things the different way. Something very important in when we develop company cultures, that we understand like what's the work personality of our organization. It's very
Mm-hmm.
huge part of the employee experience. So always been fascinated by psychometrics as well, and understanding more about the human behavior. When we spoke before earlier, we discussed our connections through well, we didn't know each other when you were working with Universum, but probably at the same time, I was also collaborating with Universum and your boss. So funnily enough that our roads have connected many, many years later on this for employer branding. Really happy to
small world,
have
sure.
you. Yeah, I know. I mean, it is. And I'm so happy to have you on this podcast. Let's start with our favorite mutual topic of employer branding. And let's talk about what the words employer branding mean to you based on, well, your experience, your personal preferences, and so on.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, first off, it's how I've made my living. So, I mean, what it means to me is my gainful employment, I guess. But I think, conceptually, I think it's just a set of perceptions and impressions and associations that I mean, much like any brand that anybody has about an entity, and associations that candidates have with a employer, and that employees have with an employer. I think everybody has one, no matter the size of your company. If you have more than one employee, even if you're cutting grass, you've got kind of an employer brand. But I think it's something that either happens to you or that you get out in front of and drive. And I think that's the big difference, I think, between the companies we work with and the companies we don't work with. But I think it's that sort of collection of perceptions. I don't think it's specific to a logo or a campaign or a value proposition or pillars. I think those are all byproducts, but are part of getting out in front and driving that. But that's how I would look at it.
I like to call it as the sort of the feeling that if I, as a person, get in contact with an organization that has an employer brand that I really like, that makes me curious, kind of pulls me towards, it's because being in connection with that organization makes me feel something special about myself. It's that kind of a connection where it's kind of like, I would say that status is not the word that I'm looking for, but it's like similar feelings that kind of increase my or boost my self-confidence, because in front of my peers that I am somehow connected to this organization. That's like the impact of the brand, and that's the magnetism of the brand, that it pulls people towards, because somehow it's being associated with the brand makes me look in my own terms and definitions better in front of my peers. Kind of like if you compare to I wouldn't say that I'm an Apple fan anymore. I was Apple fan during the Jobs era, but I'm still loyal, Mac user, Apple product user. And I've always said that there is something about belonging to this tribe of Apple users, which to me is kind of connected to innovativeness and creativity and top of the range and high technology and like really advanced stuff. And that's the reflection I want my peers to have of me as an Apple user. Mm-hmm. And even though these days getting a new version of the Apple phone every year is totally necessary, something crazy makes us just, buy it, even though it costs 2 or 3 or 4 times more than, I would say, probably equally technologically good products these days. Still, we go for that overpriced product. I think that's the impact of a brand, that you really want to, the status of the brand reflect in yourself in front of your peers. And that makes you feel special in the ways that you define for yourself. So those obviously can be different for different people, depending on what you value in your life. But I think that it's that kind of an impact. So it goes way beyond like the surface, as you said, the logos or whatever. Of course, everything tangible helps us to understand what this brand is and what it can offer for us. But it's not the brand, the logo or whatever.
Yeah, I think I mean, you touch on a couple of things there. I think that is, yeah. I mean, we not all of the companies we have the kind of brand and marketing horsepower behind them
Mm.
that Apple enjoys.
Yeah.
I think I think good marketing, people find themselves in good marketing. Your target audience finds themselves in your marketing, and it resonates that way. And I know you're a fan of storytelling, and I think that
Yes.
so I would say good storytelling leads to those associations and provoking those emotions.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting there with employer branding, but I think that is what that's the differentiator. I think is that really finding. I know that for the longest time I was coaching so many clients on their campus strategy, and we were finding that that leaders who support my development was such a critical attribute that we wanted to bring to life on campus. And I talked to so many employers who were saying, "Oh, well, we're trying to get the senior partners on campus, but they really don't have time." And it took some time to get their head around the fact that these candidates, they don't want to hear from the senior partners who are providing
Yeah.
this leadership. They want to hear from people like them, that look like them, that are close
Yeah.
to their age, that are close to their experience, who can talk about how they have been impacted by that leadership.
Yeah.
And I think you can find yourself in that kind of content, putting that kind of strategy behind your content. I think is really critical, thinking about that that end user that way. So.
I totally agree, and that's why I am so infatuated with storytelling. That it's just like the most powerful communication mechanism to help people to really find themselves in that story, or not find themselves in that story, which I believe is one of the other benefits of employer branding, that it's also very clear about if this is not for you,
Mm-hmm.
saving everyone's time and everyone's sort of pain of becoming rejected, or ending up in an organization where they fairly soon figure out that this is really not the best place for me.
Mm-hmm.
So storytelling is literally such a powerful mechanism, and very good for all branding, including employer branding. Now, you mentioned there that with employer branding that we're not there yet, or we're going towards that direction. Let's talk about the evolution of employer branding worldwide from the days sort of when you started in employer branding and throughout your career. What have you witnessed? How has it changed?
Well, I think it's definitely something, I think it depends on geographically where you are. I think we're
Mhm.
seeing, different states of that. And part of that is coming out of necessity in different markets. I think, Europe and especially the Nordics have been well ahead of North America, I believe, in employer branding. It took a while, I think, companies to catch up to that as a discipline and a strategy. I think we're definitely there now. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I think the other piece too is in Europe, and I think in the U.S. we see a lot more emphasis on campus, less so I think in Canada. Although definitely that side of things is also becoming more professionalized, but um, it's taken some time for that. When I started in employer branding, we were trying to convince senior leaders that we should, do some recruitment marketing on social media, and we were talking to C-suite leaders who weren't even text messaging. So, I think we're not having those same battles. I rarely have a conversation with somebody in talent acquisition who doesn't know what an EVP is or an employer brand, and we couldn't use acronyms around that when I started. So definitely seeing that become more professionalized. I think that it depends on the company and the entity for sure, and the level of in terms of the level of maturity around the employer branding practice. I think we're seeing more and more companies are associating their employer brand with real business results. I think
Mhm.
at the leading edge of this, we're starting to see people from the practice, from the business, who are in the business getting, recruited and moved over into recruitment marketing, into employer
Yeah.
branding. And I think that's a new thing, pretty recently, I think, in terms of the
Mhm.
evolution of that. Whereas before it was part of HR, was kind of like a nice to have sort of on the side of the business. I think about a business as like a river, and you've got people in the river, who are actually producing the goods or manufacturing or actually doing the business. And then you have all these support aspects on the banks,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
HR, like marketing. And I think more and more we're starting to see, employer brand as being part of, what's in the river. And so I think we see that. I think at the leading edge of this evolution, we also see companies who are pulling budget from their consumer brand, who are, combining the consumer brand and the marketing and the recruitment brand into one strategy. And I think we've seen this, like, from companies like Adidas as an example,
Mm-hmm.
um, that are putting forward campaigns about how cool it is to work there and how cool their clothes and their sporting goods are, and that they're part of sport, part of the future of sport. And while if you don't qualify, at least you can buy our clothes and look like you do, and look like you can be part of our
Yeah.
talent tribe. And I think
Yeah.
we're definitely seeing that evolution. I think that is more and more the future of employer branding, where budgets start to come from the consumer brand, and we think more about our candidates as our customers and vice
Yeah.
versa. And I think
Yeah.
that doesn't work in every business, but I think that is definitely part of what we're seeing for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. I agree. I agree. I remember when I started literally in 2002, my first HR job was in a American business that opened a branch in my hometown in Finland because they acquired a really huge business deal from Nokia, who was at the time the biggest thing in the mobile phone market. And at the time, we didn't even have a career. We didn't even have a local website other than some kind of a one-pager with a static photo of the business where we had our office and just like the phone number to the operations manager or something like that. And I remember that maybe like a year or two later, we got our first career site, and it was amazing that now we have this. And all recruitment market, we hired a lot. I did a lot of talent acquisition during those times because that account was growing, and we were hiring people from 7 countries to come over to Finland, to my hometown, and live there and work there. And literally because there was no social media, so all you had were like using like whatever like university or school sites or like internal email systems or whatever was available like in those countries. And then I remember when the Monster board came to Finland, and that was like a big thing. So
mhm.
if you look back, like that's what things were like over 20 years ago. And then when I started as an entrepreneur, social media had already arrived. And at the time, recruitment marketing was literally the only marketing that was done aside of the campus sort of events and stuff, which at the time were then referred to as employer branding. There was nothing else. And I remember when I innovated this new way of connecting blogging and social media with your recruitment. At the time, employers were already putting their job adverts on Monsterboard. I innovated this, like, let's write a blog about your company culture, like the kind of the set the scene of what the work environment is about and how people are in this team that is hiring. And then we started to do recruitment marketing for that role. I mean, application periods were like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks at the time. And every single week we would manually post the job, post about the job, post about the article that I written for the client in different like Facebook, and then LinkedIn. The LinkedIn groups were like a really big thing at the time. So everywhere, like multiple times during the campaign, everything was manual because there was nothing automated,
Mm-hmm.
innovated yet. And this was a really, really big thing. And it took over like the whole Finnish market. I think we're doing this completely alone in our agency for maybe like a year and a half. And then it kind of took over the entire market and became a standard thing to do. Then I realized like, okay, if we can use social media like this for recruitment campaigns. And then I tried this blog thing, and creating these blog posts for our clients is really working well. Our clients didn't have their own blogs at the time. So I remember I opened the free, like a Blogger, remember blogger.com, this
Mm-hmm.
platform that you could open a free blog for yourself. So I opened one, I called it Behind the Job Scenes, and we would post all of our client articles that we wrote on that blog so that there was somewhere where we could direct the people, and then we connected their job adverts and their career sites within that blog post so that it was like cross-connected. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I feel like I probably sound like a really old woman talking about this, but it's just like the evolution has been so incredible in this area, where many of these things that we innovated are now like a standard thing and have been a standard thing for years. And I love the way that employer branding has become more than just recruitment marketing campaigns, like an extension to the employer or recruitment marketing, and how we have other opportunities to do employer branding than just the campus stuff. Because I found during those years that there were employers who were doing campus activities, even though they were not even hiring young people or graduates. They just didn't know what else they could do. So I think that we've come a really long way, haven't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we see, I've worked with so many people over the years who created the function in their organization, right? Yeah. So they were doing something else and had to do this off the side of their desk and were responsible for standing up that whole function. I think we're seeing less of that, we definitely, and then I think, I think it plays a major role now in economic development and economic policy, and even immigration. I think when we think about the future of employer branding, I think a lot of that, we've seen, at least in this country, we've seen us, government policy open its doors to newcomers like never before, and a lot of those are folks with real developed skills. So I think part of the future of employer branding also is making companies welcoming and open to newcomers, and then figuring out how to how to be attractive to somebody who's never been here before. I think and then make them feel welcome, make them feel like this could also be a place for them. I think we've also been at the forefront of equity, of diversity, of inclusion, of belonging, and those messages. I really think the next step is incorporating AI technologies into strategy to make content more authentic, not less, and I think welcoming those newcomers and having strategies in place to be more resonant with newcomers than your competition. Potentially.
Two points there. The first one is I really picked on when you said that your government has been, bringing up new legislation to make it easier for newcomers outside Canada to come to Canada with really excellent skills, because that's something that I think that also Finland needs. I mean, we're such a small country in terms of the number of inhabitants, because we're only 5.5 million people, and obviously, the baby boomers, the people from the 50s are retired, like that was the biggest workforce in Finland, and they have retired and so on. So definitely need people coming in. And I find that, not to go into politics or anything like that, but I think that we should also, we've been talking about it for ages, but it feels like it's still not working that well of, having that legislation to bringing people with really good skills, because that's what you need. And that's what I think that all this technological evolution with, being able to work virtually from anywhere that you want, we don't, the world is our labor market now with technology, and obviously integrating people into your country, into the ways of life and how you work, how you live there. I think it's a really important part of employer branding when you bring in people. I did that for a couple of years in my first place to work as an HR, because we were bringing in people, but I didn't really realize what it really meant until I went to work abroad, and I didn't get that. And because I did all my university studies in England, but it's a different thing when you go to university and everyone is living the same stage of life as you are. So you naturally make friends and you have like that social circle. But then I went to work in Belgium, and obviously all my colleagues, they had families and, their circles outside the world. And all of a sudden I'm there like, I don't know anyone. If a car would hit me today when I walk home from work, nobody would know because I don't know anybody here. I don't have any friends here. I don't have any social circles here. I don't like, I don't have any support system here. So I think that's a really important, that what you brought up, that really important part of employer branding is also like, if you are bringing people into your country to work for you, you have got to think about how you're going to help them to build those support systems and integrate them into your society, because it's we don't think of that because it's such a, like a thing in our own backbone, our DNA, how it works, in the country that you were born and where you're living, have lived for a long time. And then things are like very ordinary things can be very different in another country. And then you've got no clue. So I think that's a really important part of employer branding as well. And then the other thing that you tapped on was the AI element in generating content, because that's very much, I think, the topic of the town for all marketing and communications, isn't it? And I recently saw a study, a social media study. I spoke about it in episode 167, I believe, that addressed the topic of AI in employer branding. And based on that study, which I can't remember who made it, but it's in it's in that episode. They had found out that AI content doesn't feel authentic, and that's why people don't trust employers who are creating employer branding content with AI. And I thought that that's a very important revelation because it has been kind of too good to be true, hasn't it? So I
Well,
know that the company that you're working at now is like innovating in this area. So can you share with us like your views being at the sort of the front there in this domain, AI and employer branding?
yeah, I mean, I think our mission is to democratize the employer brand. So I think there definitely is a concern about the authenticity that comes out of
Mhm.
content generated by AI. We have that same concern. I think that if it's clear that it's been generated by AI, you're doing it wrong. Um,
Mhm.
to be a little bit facetious, I
Agree.
think we see it as a tool that, I mean, Mark Twain, I think it was said that I would have written a shorter letter if I had more time. You've
Hmm.
ever been in that situation where you've got something, you're trying to boil it down to the essence, and it just takes so long to
Yep.
have less content. And
Yep.
and I think, so the way that we've approached it is to curate AI and we've developed the world's first cloud-based generative AI tool set for employer branding specifically. So it's built for purpose. I think you see a lot of other tools in marketing that are adopted for the employer brand space that it's
Hmm.
really hard to actually make them functional to scale. So it never really works and never really takes off. And it's always some kind of like, bit of a mutilation of what it's really intended to do.
Mm.
So our approach was to build something from the ground up, fit for purpose. And it's really 6 tools built into one, where you can essentially plug in your employer brand, the attributes of your employer brand, your enterprise brand guidelines, and use that to teach the tool to make sure that any content that comes out is adhering to those guardrails, that is true and consistent with your employer brand. And then also using it as a tool to generate content, to build advocacy, to bring advocates into the platform, to create something that's fun to participate in, that enables employees to really tell their individual story about what they like about their work, to have something that's totally accessible to everyone, regardless of their language capabilities or their technical capabilities. I
Hmm.
think I'm often thinking about that. That person in the company, maybe a company industry or manufacturing, and they've got somebody who maybe isn't that vocal, who's been there forever, who is a real artifact in the organization, who has a really important story to tell. That
Yeah.
how do you get at that story? And we've really done that successfully to make sure that every employee has the opportunity to have a voice, that has an opportunity to participate, that they don't need a laptop, they don't need to be sitting in front of a computer. So something that's easy to get employees involved in, that's easy for employer brand leaders to manage those advocates. And to actually pull in content, to curate content that's real, and then using the AI to ask questions that sort of adhere to what the inputs are from those employees, so that
Right.
we're able to use the AI to create more authentic content, more authentic storytelling. So I think that's where I'm saying, if you can tell that it's created by a bot, nobody wants to hear
Yeah,
from a bot.
exactly.
No, and candidates want to hear from your marketing just as much as they want to hear from a bot, right? They want to
Yeah,
hear from peers. They want to hear from other
yeah,
people like them who have an experience, not that far removed from their own, that they can relate to. And we're finding that generates about 10 times more engagement and more visits to a career site. If I'm considering an opportunity and I get an email from the recruiter with the job description, that's one thing. But if I get an email from the recruiter with the job description and a video from the team I'm actually going to be working with, that's much more compelling when they're already welcoming me. And if you think about that newcomer, if you think about people of underrepresented groups, people who've been marginalized, and to hear from the actual people that they're going to be working with, rather than just from marketing trying to convince them. But if I'm a DevOps person or a software engineer, I'm much more interested in hearing from the other software engineers I'm going to collaborate with and work with than
right.
I am from marketing. So our approach is to use the technology to generate story ideas based on what we know is working for a specific target audience, to use the AI to help do that research for you so that we can know which stories are going to be most resonant for that targeted candidate, which channels are going to be most effective right now. And that is also kind of seasonal as well in terms of which channels are going to be most effective to reach these candidates. So we're able to use the AI as a starting point to say, this is where you should place your content. These are the topics that are going to resonate with this target audience in this territory that does these things. So really taking research a whole other step in terms of not,
Yeah,
this is what the research says, but this is what the research says, and this is how you should talk about it, where you should talk
yeah,
about it, when you should talk about it. And other people like this candidate, this is what they're engaging with and what's trending with them right now. So the tool does that for you and suggests topics and story ideas for the employer brand strategist or the recruitment marketer in terms of what they should be asking employees to talk about. It also looks at the employee population to determine, well, this is who's going to be an effective advocate for you. So we're able to kind of rate out of a score of 100 each employee in terms of how quickly will they respond, what kind of followership do they have, is this consistent with what they've posted before, is this going to be interesting to their audience, and are the topics that we're going to ask them to talk about of interest to them too. So really democratizing that employer brand experience, catering the questions that we're asking to what's relevant and interesting for different employees, and then picking the employees based on what kind of traction are we going to get if they were to share this. Is it going to go into a vacuum and nobody's going to hear it, or is this going to really resonate with our target audience? So we're always looking for trying to tap into that discretionary effort of employees, right? And if we're
uh,
able to create
mm,
something and help them have a voice that's true and authentic, they're going to share that. If we're instead creating something that's scripted by marketing or that clearly is AI, then they probably, maybe they'll participate to be a good cooperative employee, but they're
mhm.
probably not going to share it on their own
Yeah,
socials. And
yeah,
part of what we're
yeah,
always targeting is that like army of influencers, because those
yeah.
employees have exponentially more reach than most employer brands will ever get the budget for. So it's all about, for us, it's all about really democratizing that employer brand, giving each employee a voice, and making sure that those stories are really true and authentic. I know the research clearly shows that the more polished your content is, the less engaging it is. So, from my perspective, it needs to be, I call it flawsome. right? It needs to be awesome content, but it needs to be a bit flawed. It needs to be real. It needs to be authentic. Having the right coloring and the right image with your logo in the top left-hand corner, and that all works great for our marketing police and the enterprise brand, but it doesn't necessarily speak to me as a candidate. So,
Absolutely.
so our whole, and I think this is a big part of the future of employer branding, is more authentic content, content that's created by employees, endorsed by employees, represents their voice, and talking to their future employees. And I think when we think about newcomers, when we think about diversity, these are, I think this is a strategy that's really winning. At least that's what we're seeing from our clients. We have about yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say we have about 100. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so at the Martech, we have about 100 clients right now. We've just received our Series A funding, about $8 million in funding.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And and we're seeing incredible results from the clients that we're bringing on, because there's just so much content out there. So I think really what we're seeing is this is the way to cut through the noise. We know from research, we know that different employers have a hard time differentiating from each other. When we talk to candidates, candidates will tell us, I can't really tell these employers apart. I know that they're about diversity and inclusion. I know they're about innovation. And I know that they talk about work-life balance and corporate social responsibility or sustainability.
But everyone does that.
Exactly. So does everybody else.
Does.
And I think the piece, like when I talk to employers, and over the last 25 years of doing this work, every single employer I've consulted to tells us how different they are and how unique they are. And what makes them unique is their people. But instead, what we often see is companies say, oh, we're so unique and different, and here's some content from our marketing department, which is the same as everybody else's marketing department, with the same background, same education, and same parameters and same rules. But I think the difference is your people. And so our methodology, people to tell that story, and your differentiation will come through because your people are different. Right. And so that's more authentic. That's going to resonate with your candidates much more. And that's what's more likely to be shared.
Yeah, I so wholeheartedly agree with that. Now, if our audience wants to learn more about this product, where can they go? Where can they find more information?
Yeah, you can reach us at themartech.com to get a demo. You can also reach me on LinkedIn. And I'm sure Susanna, you'll provide that information.
I will. Yes.
And I go on LinkedIn. I go by Jason Kipps, because when I'm on the phone, if I say Jay Kipps, my name becomes Jacobs pretty quickly. So once I know you, I typically go by Jay. But you can find me on LinkedIn at Jason Kipps, Kipps with a double P, as in Peter.
I'll make sure to tag that on the show notes article. All right. It's been fascinating to talk to you again, Jay. And I definitely want to demo this product of yours as well. So let's organize that. Can I demo it with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I look forward to showing it.
It sounds like it.
It really is kind of fun to be in this situation. We're the first to bring anything like this into the market, and it's kind of a fun position to be in, because when we show employers, every day, they're just like, wow, this is that, why wouldn't anybody do this? And it really eliminates the need for agencies, essentially.
Don't say that. You still need a strategy. You still need to learn how to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All righty. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And,
thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. This was so exciting. And anyone else who wants to have a demo, then contact Jay. You can find him on LinkedIn, Jason Kipps, Kipps. I'll tag it on the show notes article. And I'm going to do the same, book a demo with you. And other than that, hey, people, employer branding is evolving, and literally you have to make sure that you stay authentic. And the whole point of employer branding is to differentiate your organization from all of your competitors, to have a different voice, a different thing. And the only thing that is truly different is the way you work with the people that you have. So make it about that. All right. Thank you, everyone. See
Thanks
you
for having
next
me.
time.
All
Yes,
right. Take
thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.